The economy bounced back in the fourth quarter of last year following a difficult third quarter. Statistics South Africa says the gross domestic product grew by 1.2% in the quarter following a 1.7% contraction in the third quarter. Economic growth for 2021 as a whole rose by 4.9%. That's in line with expectations. 5 industries recorded positive growth between the third and fourth quarter of last year. The agricultural sector continued to show resilience, growing by 12.2%, mainly due to increased production of animal products. Production in the mining sector decreased by 3%, with decreases in production reported for iron ore, gold and coal. The manufacturing sector increased by 2.8%, with the largest contribution recorded in the petroleum, chemical products, rubber and plastics products categories. The trade, catering and accommodation industry increased, supported by retail trade, motor trade and catering and accommodation services. Positive performance in the fourth quarter was supported by easier lockdown restrictions, allowing for more movement and economic activity. A nice bounce back in the fourth quarter from that horrid third quarter, of course, as we know. So for more on this, let's now speak to the Statistician General, that is Mr. Risenga Maluleke at Statistics South Africa. Thank you very much, Mr. Maluleke, for joining us. A very good fourth quarter performance, generally speaking. It seems as though there was a whole lot more economic activity than we'd seen in previous quarters.
Well, Nompumelelo, let us look at how the fourth quarter finds itself. It finds itself in an environment of restrictions that were put through in the third quarter. Let us look at exports and imports, for example. In the third quarter, the ports and borders were largely closed. And when they opened, they allowed a lot more movements of goods. And indeed, as we can see, that exports rose by 8.5% and imports rose by 8.9%. That is from the side of the consumption. But also when we look from the side of production, we can see that while indeed agriculture rose the most in the form of 12.2%, the biggest contribution, which was 0.6 percentage points, came from personal services, which you will remember during the benchmarking and rebasing, we actually removed education and health from government to personal services. And because of COVID-19, we see health being a big contributor in personal services.
So when it comes to the consumption side of the economy, what's the story there?
Let us look at household final consumption. We can see that largely food and non-alcoholic beverages contributed the most, having contributed equally about 0.6 percentage points, while the biggest growth was from hotels and restaurants in the region of about 13.2%. The contribution thereof was just 0.5 percentage points. So when consumption comes on board, when people are starting to consume goods that are produced in the economy, it shows us that our economy is recovering. In all categories of household consumption, we have seen a positive growth. The one being the lowest being housing, electricity and water, where it grew by 0.1 of a percentage point and indeed contributed about 0 percentage points to the main output of 2.8% consumption from households.
Mr. Maluleke, your GDP report also looks at the issue of investment. We know that investment has been running low for several years. Any much of a change in the fourth quarter?
Well, we can see that indeed, when you look at investments, There were effects from non-residential and residential buildings. But largely, if you look at even the entire year, all industries grew. The strongest contribution in the 4.9 coming largely from finance. The only one that grew in the negative is construction. And we know that construction has been depressed for some time, because even on the side of the quarterly labor force survey, it continues to shed jobs.
And then lastly, Mr. Maluleke, of course, we did speak to you extensively in February about the census. We know that it was supposed to have come to an end at the end of February. Can you just give us a summation of how that process went and when we're likely to receive the data?
Well, we have committed to South Africans that we would like to release the results of the census a year from the time we're finished with data collection. We were supposed to have finished with data collection as of the 28th of February, my apologies. But what has happened is that there were lower numbers of registrations. We had about 455,000 households that had registered in the region of about 17.3 million households, 17.4 dwelling units in the country. As we are talking, only a third of those who had registered to be enumerated or to self-enumerate had returned their forms. So we have deployed our field workers. It is indeed our responsibility to have to count everyone who finds themselves within the borders of South Africa as of the 2nd of February, the night of the 2nd of February. Having said so, one of the things that we would like to commit to South Africans is that we will count everyone. We have experienced a bit of challenges, but we are turning the corner on most of those challenges. It wouldn't be called a census if it had no challenges. Everywhere, including in our own country, in previous censuses, and everywhere in the world, censuses pose a kind of challenges from time to time. We will count everyone. We have decided to add as of the 20th of March. But if we find out that we haven't actually been able to capture as much as we would have wanted, we will go on mop-up operations to still reach out to those that are difficult to reach, particularly in gated communities, as well as in inaccessible informal settlements. Our suburbs are still proving to be a bit difficult. I was in Tembisa this morning, and you walk the whole street. Out of 12 houses, we only were able to access one dwelling unit where people are out at work. So we are trying everything possible to count everyone.
Thank you very much, Mr. Maluleke, for your time and for giving us the insights on the latest data on GDP. That was the Statistician General, Risenga Maluleke.